think just some people are being rushed through the training and they still don't have anywhere near the experience they probably should have to be a qualified gas engineer. I wouldn't say much has changed in terms of being a gas engineer itself. I think what's changed is what you need to know now. When a boiler broke down 15 years ago, there weren't many things to go wrong as such, maybe 20 years ago. Where now you need to have a bit of a base knowledge of that boiler, that manufacturer, so that you can identify these issues.
In a sentence or two, why should people care about this conversation? Because not many engineers are also on the tools, plus a gas safe inspector. So it's
no, a lot of people. Once a lot of people have gone over to gas safe to become inspectors, then they don't. Very rarely do they venture back to being on the tools as I did. So I have had a really good insight into both sides.
This is the Gas Engineer Podcast. I'm your host, Tulloch Priest, and today I'm joined by Terry Sawyer. From inspecting installations across London to guiding engineers through inspections, Terry is a highly experienced gas engineer with over 15 years on the tools and a former gas safe inspector. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Because of Terry's career path, he has a unique view of the wider industry. Today's episode will be covering his perspective on how the industry has changed and what it means for the future. How did that being an inspector kind of change your view on the industry? And
I think it opened my eyes up to potential flaws in maybe some training providers, things like that. Some have had phenomenal training, from their initial gas training, plumbing, and even through to sort of their ACS exams to getting qualified and things in the gas industry. But I think it showed me that there is a right way to be taught and a wrong way, and unfortunately, a lot of people are being sort of taught the wrong, not necessarily the wrong way. They're all being taught the same thing. I think just some people are being rushed through the training, and then they're starting, they're getting registered with Gas Safe, and they're starting this, new venture, and they still don't have anywhere near the experience they probably should have to be a qualified gas engineer.
What would you say would be the kind of the right way of training if you have kind of thought about that in depth?
I think there are too many. Too many people are in a rush to become qualified, and I think although there is a process you have to follow, including doing your portfolio with a registered business, I think too many people are rushing through that portfolio stage. You have to get photos, you have to do write-ups on jobs. It's very easy to rush through that just to get back to be able to do your exams. There are timescales. You're not allowed to return within a certain amount of time. But I think a lot of people are not taking that time and using that time wisely, to actually ask questions and get hands-on fitting a boiler. A lot of guys, you can become gas safe without actually fitting a boiler yourself. You can get some photos with a boiler that's being fitted. You can hang it on the wall, but generally it's very difficult when you're when you're at a fast pace, when you're with a business, you're out with a business doing an install, doing something like that. It's very hard to take it all in, what you've got to learn. You could fit 100 boilers and you still might not be you still might have questions. And that's the problem, because they rush through. A lot of people rush through it.
Well, you can kind of see it though. If let's say you're doing slightly later in life, you're doing a career change, you need to start earning that money soon.
You do. And I think that might be the issue. I think that's the issue, because whilst you're doing your training and whilst you're doing your portfolio, you might be in a position where you're doing these things for free, or in some cases you've paid someone to do your portfolio. So you're already quite a few £1,000s down. So the quicker you get qualified, the quicker you get registered with Gas Safe, the quicker you can start earning money. But the problem is I inspected a few of these guys, new guys straight through that didn't even have the equipment they needed to be a gas engineer, because they said, well, I haven't had any work yet. I've had no jobs. Yeah. So it's difficult, because you need the tools, the equipment, your flue analyzers, all them things. You need all them. Otherwise you can't be a gas engineer, but they're not cheap. So a lot of these guys rush through. I end up doing their inspections, and they turn around and say, "I haven't done anything yet. I've done nothing. I've got no work. What should I do? Where should I go?" And it's not for an inspector to tell them how to get work. That's the difficult bit. So a lot of them rush it, thinking, get through it, start getting money. Start earning money again. And unfortunately, that's normally means you end up slightly less ready for the real world, for the working on gas boilers, things like that.
Hi, producer Alex here, wondering if you knew that you aren't subscribed to the channel. Well, specifically, 93% of you are not subscribed, and we really appreciate you tuning in right now, but you're missing out on even more interesting content. You're already this far into the episode, so why not subscribe to the Gas Engineer Software YouTube channel? Because showing your support genuinely makes a difference. It's free, takes a second to click, and helps us continue to make the content that you want to listen to. Speaking of, let's get back to it.
In an ideal world, how would you what would be the ideal person going, like, from transitioning or, as a first kind of career? How would you actually get into the gas industry?
I luckily enough, for years, I've done quite a lot of jobs. I had quite a lot of experience before that doing other things. But a friend of mine just said to me one day, I was quite hands-on anyway. So a friend of mine many years ago said, like, why don't you come and train with me? And yeah, best decision I ever made, because I went out, but I actually I wanted to learn the job. I wasn't just rushing through it. I wanted to actually learn, is this right for me? And learn the things that any sort of good engineer should know. So I spent a lot of time before I even got to the stage of doing my proper training, just going out with him and learning, watching and having a go, getting my hands dirty. A lot of people do, get to a certain point in life, and then they do ask me, oh, is it, I was thinking about becoming a gas engineer. Is it worth it? And I'll say, yes, of course it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. But you've got to get your experience up before, like they say, obviously don't, run before you can walk, that sort of thing. A lot of guys try and sprint before they can walk. And I've still got friends now who have been in the gas industry for many years who can fit a boiler, brilliant. But when it comes to fixing a boiler, they phone me up and say, do you want this job? And I say to them, why don't you fix it yourself? And they say, well, because it's too much to, but it isn't. It isn't too much. It just takes a little bit of time getting to know the workings of a boiler, and then generally you can, you can fix it. But I know a lot of guys that still don't do that side of it because it's more learning, I suppose, more understanding rather than just being able to fit a boiler. That's the issue.
Okay. And what about for yourself? Like, some people gas engineers go into more management, other people sort of coming off the tools a little bit, but you kind of went into being a gas safe inspector.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of prompted you to go into that direction?
Do you know what? I don't quite know. Obviously I see an advert come up for it, and I think I wanted to slow sort of my pace of life down, because running my business before I joined Gas Safe, I was busy, and as anyone watching this and other podcasts that you've done with other people that own businesses and run their own business, it's stressful running a business, really stressful. It doesn't matter how well you do, it always seems the better you do, the more stressful it is. So, and I think I just got to a point where I didn't feel like I was at home much. I didn't feel like I was around the kids much. I wasn't getting involved in their clubs or anything like that. And I see the advert come up, and I just said to my wife, "Look, is it worth giving that a shot?" And yeah, so I went for it, and luckily enough, I got it, because obviously it taught me a lot going to Gas Safe. Just the extra things that I learned, the things that I didn't know before that I thought I did know. Yeah, and it opened my eyes. It opened my eyes a lot. I mean, I liked getting my hands dirty, so I didn't mind doing the complaints or concerns that they call them, because concerns, generally the inspector gets his tool bag out and starts testing, where on an inspection, the inspector doesn't get his tools out and start testing anything. So I like to get my hands dirty. So I was first one to put my hand up and go, yeah, I'll take that concern. Didn't really matter where it was. If no other inspector wanted it, I generally went for it, because I actually liked turning up, getting all my tools out, and almost picking apart these concerns that we got, But yeah, that side of it was fine, because I sort of, that's why I joined. I got a bit of a life back outside of work, if that makes sense. And I hadn't had that for many years. A bit of a life, a bit of free time almost.
Yeah, and then at the end of that, you did go back to the tools. You did.
I did. Do you know what it is? It's quite strange. I missed getting my hands dirty. I actually missed the. I know it sounds a bit crazy. I missed the stress. I missed what comes with running a business. And being and having a company and stuff. I missed them stresses. I missed getting the jobs booked in and things like that. So yeah, in the end, it was. Although I loved Gas Safe.
I wouldn't say stress. I would say challenge.
Challenge, yeah. I think at some points it's a good stress. It's a lot of people often say to me, "Oh, how's work?" And I go, "Yeah, it's really busy. It's really busy. It's a good thing, but I'm really stressed. I'm really stressed because we're so busy, and it's trying to keep everyone happy is what makes it stressful." And a lot of people say, "Well, that's a good stress, isn't it?" And I say, "Yeah, it is. It's a good it's a stress I'd rather have than having no work or less work. So it's." But I miss them. I miss them things. I loved the what I was doing at Gas Safe, and I loved the way it worked, and I could highlight things with other engineers that they didn't quite know or that they needed to work on, and things like that. So I like that side of it. But yeah, I like getting my hands dirty, and there's only one way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels you mentioned that when you went to Gas Safe, what kind of like big standout things did you learn from when you transitioned from being a sort of solely on the tools to being an inspector?
Probably how little I actually knew, because you only learn
How long did you work on the tools before you actually became an inspector?
oh, maybe 12,
Just roughly, just to give some
13,
context.
14 years, yeah, of
Okay, so a
yeah,
good chunk of time. So.
yeah, and but you only learn you only learn what you get taught, and you only get taught what you need to know to pass generally. Now, yeah, there's lots of very helpful information Gas Safe can provide. Technical bulletins are one of them because they get updated so often. A technical bulletin will tell you anything about a certain subject, and it gets updated every time there is an update. No one reads technical bulletins unless they are looking for a specific thing, and that maybe should, because there's so many of them, but they are very, very useful things to have. And you can go onto Gas Safe's website and you can have a look at technical bulletins on anything. Smart meters, things like that. There's so many different smart meters now. No one knows. You get so many engineers say, "I don't know how to use that smart meter, that model smart meter." Well, there's a technical bulletin that tells you all about it. You just got to go through the list. But there's also a lot of helpful technical bulletins on there that you wouldn't have ever come across. That you wouldn't have even thought of.
What's a good example, or give us some examples?
Things like, I'll tell you one that most people don't. And I used to try and not catch people out with a question, but I used to say to people, okay, gas meters outside the house. All right. And you've got, it's on the side. It's on the side of the house in a box. And the gas is coming up out the ground into the box. I'd say to them, nothing wrong with that. You do a tightness test on that. Nothing wrong with that, right? Fine. And you come back the following year, and now there's a conservatory built over. You've got a conservatory now built over that where that gas meter is. And that would be one of my questions. What are the issues now? And loads of people are thinking I'm catching them out. Oh, because you can't have a gas meter inside. We go, of course you can. There's gas meters under your stairs. Of course you can have a gas meter inside. What can't you have inside? And that's where there's technical bulletins that tell you that you can't have plastic gas supply inside. So then it comes down to, right, well, who's at fault here? Who's at fault? Well, whoever built the conservatory is at fault because they've done two things. They've built over service, which you're not allowed to do. So they've put their footings over a gas pipe, over a plastic gas pipe, and there's now a gas pipe inside, plastic. So it's a call to Cadent. Let Cadent deal with it, because there's not actually anything a gas engineer can do about that. So it's categorised as at risk, but turning off the gas supply wouldn't make any difference because it's the incoming gas that you can't control, right? So a lot of people that used to not catch them out, but I used to say to them, right, what's wrong with that? Some people got it. And do you know what? Just little things like that. There's a technical bulletin that explains a lot of that about build over service. And obviously then you've got plastic inside where you can't have it. It can't be plastic, and when people used to go, oh, I didn't even think of that. And then I get a phone call a couple of weeks later saying, oh, I've just found the plastic inside. Someone's built a porch on the front of their house and they've done it themselves. And then the gas meter's in there with plastic to it. And he says, I wouldn't have ever known that.
So this kind of happens more regularly than you think. It's not like a once in like a 10-year kind of event.
It's quite common. I've seen it a few times, yeah. I've seen it a few times where people have built things on the side of their house and just not even thought about what they're actually doing to the gas meter, because no one ever thinks about the plastic gas pipe inside. It's not something that gets gets thought about because you assume it can be used inside, but obviously it can melt, and then you've got a big problem if it does. If they have a fire, you've got a huge problem.
You've seen hundreds of engineers in action. What are some of like the biggest quality gaps that you kind of notice?
I used to prefer inspecting businesses that have been running for a while, that have had inspections before, because generally they were like the old school type of engineer. They've been around a long time. They've seen a lot. They've had a lot. They've had to deal with a lot, and they've also come across a lot of gas safe issues where they might have had to call gas safe, for advice. I think it's a lot of the newer ones that have not all new probationary inspections were bad. They would actually, a lot of them were very, very good, very, very well organised, very well equipped in terms of what they needed. They read their letter from gas safe and they followed it, exactly to the letter. So but I think, some of the business, some of the engineers that rushed through and perhaps didn't get the quality of training. That was the issue I see, the gap that I see, because they don't really have any way of getting that unless they go out with a business. That's what I said to some of them. Look, find a business that will take you out with them, that will show you how to do it, because you're qualified. But I spoke to some that ended up saying, I don't know why I got registered. I'm going to go back up the city and do pipe, just do pipe running on site. It just because I need to get paid, I need money. So they actually registered gas safe and then said, but I'm not going to do any gas work. I haven't got any work. So I'm going to go back to plumbing.
You kind of have that gap where you have all that training, you're using your savings,
yeah,
and then you just
you need to go back to work. And if you haven't got any gas work, and that was a question I got from a lot of the probationary guys, is how do I get work? And it was almost impossible to say to them, especially if they didn't have all the equipment, because they couldn't afford it. They've spent all their money getting gas safe.
Are there many opportunities to work for other companies?
In terms of company, I think that is also a slight problem with some of these new guys that are getting freshly qualified. So a lot of companies do require a certain experience. They want someone who's been qualified for 3 years, 5 years, things like that. So it's difficult for a new engineer to get into a company that's well established. The issue then that sort of poses for me, and what I've seen, is that means then the companies that are willing to take you on, they know that you're not experienced, but yet they seem to then bombard the engineer with more jobs than in a day than what they could probably safely handle. And I think that's the issue, because what they then do, they say, well, you've got no experience, so they pay you much less than what the job is actually worth. But when you haven't got any other opportunities to earn money as a gas engineer, you can't really turn it down. So that I did see that, and I have seen that since I've actually been back on the tools as well. I've seen it where you hear of some of these engineers saying, "Well, I've got to do 15 gas certs a day and things like that to be able to make any money." Well, then the problem with that is that's unless you're doing 20-hour day. If you're doing them properly, that's a very almost impossible task, but it's the only way that they can earn money. So what tends to happen is they tend to make mistakes. They're rushing through each job. And I did see that. I actually see it. I was lucky enough to go out on an inspection with one of the large business inspectors who they deal with the bigger companies. And we sort of see it firsthand that you can make silly little mistakes when you're rushing through a safety check or a service that ultimately can end up killing someone.
Well, if you're going to try and do 15 in a day, your focus is not going to be on quality.
No, definitely not, and not when you're getting paid per job and it's not a lot of money. That's silly little things that can lead. Test points on gas valves being left open. You've done your inlet pressure on your gas valve. You've had open your gas, and you've taken all your equipment off, and you've not done the screw up. You then go and put the case back on the boiler and everything, and you're on your way, and it fills the boiler up with gas. And obviously, that has very bad consequences. Silly little things like that. Test points. Now, this is one that I actually see on Friday. I don't know, Monday. Yeah, Friday. I went to do a gas safety inspection, and the boiler was in the loft. And when I got in the loft, I noticed that the flue test point cap was not it was not screwed on. It was just left next to the boiler, and the top of the boiler was all rusted where the flue gas has been corroding the top of the boiler. Now that is where someone's rushed. That's all it is. They've just not put the cap back on. Now, a lot of us have done that. We've all done it. But normally you realise you've done it when you've driven away and you turn around and go back. I've done it where I've gone back before and I had screwed it on. But in my head, I'm thinking, did I screw it back on? If you doubt yourself as a gas engineer, you need to go back and have a look. It's if you're embarrassed about it, you say, I think I've left one of my tools in your loft or by your boiler. But silly things like that happen more often than what they should, especially when people have got a lot of jobs on.
Well, so what other choices do you have then? So if you're just starting out, you just need to find a decent company, because it's expensive for the company to send 2 engineers out on the same job.
100%. I mean, I did suggest to a lot of people that they, volunteer their services just to get a bit more experience. Bearing in mind, it's a very daunting thing fitting a boiler for the first time. If you've never fitted a boiler before on your own, fitting a boiler for the first time, a lot of guys won't do it. They won't put themselves in a position because it is quite if something went wrong, it's quite serious. If they don't do it right, they're getting a call. Gas Safe might be calling them up. So, and if you haven't fitted one properly on your own, then that's when people avoid it. And it's not, obviously, it's not easy just to go, right, I'm going to start fitting boilers, because you need customers. But I said to people, look, just volunteer. I've taken people out with me before who have just said, look, I just need a bit more experience. I don't worry about taking someone out and showing them what I know, because I've got my own customer base, and I'm fortunate to have my regular business. But I'll take anyone out and show them how I do it. Yeah, I used to take people out all the time and go through it with them. And if they had questions, I'd answer the questions. Because you can't. If I knew that, obviously I don't know the answers to everything. Far from it. But I'm not afraid to ring up Gas Safe or any of my old colleagues and ask them if I'm at all unsure of something. I'm not afraid to ring up and ask. But generally sometimes that's the only way you can get work, is by getting more experience. And sometimes, unfortunately, that might mean volunteering 1 or 2 days a week, if there's a local business that will take you out with them. A lot of people go, no one will do that, because they don't want to lose work to someone else and blah blah blah. But I actually think it's a lot of people would appreciate a second pair of hands. All right, if you want to come out and learn how to fit a boiler, well, you're probably going to have to help, carry a few tools and help with it, the manual side of it. Well, that's part of the job. Everyone's had to do that at some point. So actually, some people would appreciate.
There's one way to find out, is just ask people.
Exactly that.
With your because you've been in the industry and seen it from a few different angles, what's actually changed, like when you first started to sort of now?
What's changed? I mean, well, there's a lot more people. There's a lot more gas engineers now than there was when I started. A lot more people are doing it. I wouldn't say much has changed in terms of being a gas engineer itself. I think what's changed is what you need to know now. When a boiler broke down 15 years ago, there weren't many things to go wrong as such, maybe 20 years ago, where now you need to have a bit of a base knowledge to help to make you feel more confident, to have a bit of a base knowledge of that boiler, that manufacturer, so that you can identify these issues. Now, most things, like with everything we own now, everything's got more sensors in it, more electronics, more things, where if a fan in an old boiler is not working because it won't be spinning. The fan's not working, it's not spinning, right? That if the fan is working, but the boiler's still not firing up, well, then it's going to be an air pressure switch on the old boilers. So you just trace it, where now it's going to be a code. And the code is going to be what, determines the way you fix an appliance. But there are so many to know now. So I think that's changed in terms of what people are willing to learn, because there's more things. Not everyone learns the same way, not everyone remembers the same way, but I definitely think that's changed a lot, and I think it will change even more as technology obviously evolves with the industry.
Because you've got the kind of the greener energy, or the heat pumps and other things coming in as well. How do you kind of see that, that those kind of changes, impact the industry?
Do you know what? I've seen people are going over, they're doing their courses to learn how to do these. I think that's just to keep up with the potential increase in customers who are going to ask ask for, these greener solutions, these air source, heat source, and all sorts. I think the problem with that is, again, most people you speak to who fit air source, heat source know how to fit them, but no one seems to know how to fix them when they go wrong. So I think that's the downside, because it isn't even like you can read a book and it will tell you how to fix these things. They do go wrong, unfortunately, and but too many businesses are focused too much on installation and then relying on manufacturers to do repairing, that sort of thing. So although doing a little course to learn how to install these things, it's not much, and for most of these engineers out there, it's a walk in the park. I think all of a sudden, if more and more people have these, all of a sudden we're not going to have any engineers who can actually repair them when they go wrong.
Are you fed up with drowning in a pile of paperwork that comes with running your heating and plumbing business? Gas Engineer Software is an easy-to-use, all-in-one job management system made especially for UK heating and plumbing companies. From handling customer details to building quotes, issuing certificates and sending invoices, Gas Engineer Software will help you save time, eliminate paperwork, and make running your business easy. Start a free trial by clicking in the link in the bio. We are early days, though.
Yes.
So it's kind of, the need is on the installation side. And I think, as demand for the repairs and stuff comes in.
I think so. Yeah, I think that will change. I do think that obviously, from my own personal view on this, is that they won't take off and then all of a sudden everyone's going to have one in their house, because they don't work very well in certain houses. It's been proven. New builds, great, heavily insulated. They've all been air tested. That's all. They work well. They keep the house warm. They keep your hot water warm. They do really well. But I've known people already have had them taken out because it just hasn't worked in the same way that we want them to work, because it is early days. Technology is new, relatively new in terms of what we're asking of this, these machines and what they actually do. So I think that is why a lot of engineers are still put off by even getting involved with them.
Well, I think the other thing is that, the combi boilers, they work over such a wide kind of range.
Yeah, definitely.
And for the heat pumps, you need to do your calculations correct.
100%. Yeah.
You don't want to be too big, too small. It just needs to be
right.
Just right.
And I think, and also changing the views of your old school gas engineer is always going to be very difficult. Especially when they're when they're trialing hydrogen, which is obviously becoming gas. They gas safe are heavy on what hydrogen is, what part that's going to play. Because a lot of boilers now that are being manufactured are capable of they're hydrogen ready, as I said, which is likely to be the probably more long-term solution if they can work out a way of doing it. They are trialing different things around the country with hydrogen. And
do you think that's a likely kind of like out of heat pumps or hydrogen? If you had to place a bet, which way would you go?
Hydrogen, because unless you're going to insulate every single house prior to fitting a heat pump, that sort of thing. I think hydrogen, they're already talking about the mixing the 20% hydrogen with natural gas in the pipelines, which is the equivalent to something like 5 million cars off the road or something like that, which is quite a big chunk. Just having a small amount of hydrogen, and most things will still work absolutely fine with that small mix of hydrogen. So I think hydrogen is probably more likely to happen rather than trying to get everyone on heat source, because it isn't going to work everywhere. You can't have it working everywhere. I think that will be the likely way forward.
Yeah, and as a gas engineer, do we need to get ready for hydrogen?
I don't think it's going to be for a long time. Hydrogen requires much more volume than natural gas. So to get 100% hydrogen to a property, you'd have to upgrade the gas supplies to be able to cope with the extra volume. Everyone would have to lose lose things like gas fires because they won't work with hydrogen. But I think having this mix, they might work out a way of doing a mix of hydrogen and gas. It will probably work better, I would have thought, than trying, especially over the next, I'm not talking 100 years. 100 years we'll probably have something else. It would be everything will be running off some technology that hasn't even been thought of yet. But I think hydrogen is probably easier in the long term to try and be greener, as a whole for the country.
Yeah, I just really don't know.
No,
Because there's challenges with hydrogen, and yeah, it's just tricky. Like if you're going to do like infrastructure changes, this is just a huge investment there. But as you say, maybe a mix. I don't know.
no, I don't know. I think all new builds, obviously, new builds are all getting the obviously the heat source pumps and stuff. So, and they're equipped to, they're being designed with them. They're being
Yeah, with
designed.
that mind. Well,
Yeah,
you've got the heat calculations. You got everything there.
you've got everything now, and all the houses are obviously air pressure tested. They've got to maintain a certain air. So you're creating the right environment and right building to suit this technology, and then they work great. They work brilliantly. Same with a lot of in London now, big buildings, they're all going down that route because it's being designed well. I just think it's much harder to adapt that technology to an older house. My house is 1930s, so it's probably wouldn't cope well with
No,
air
no.
source.
Anything Victorian,
No, that's what I mean. That's
old
what I mean.
stone cottage,
No, exactly that. I think
yeah.
then it'd be very difficult to make it work. Hybrid system is something that's been becoming more popular to back up the heat source. So the heat source still does its job, but there's still a gas boiler that backs up the heat source. Now, these hybrid systems are looking probably the most likely way to go short term if you've got an older property, but you want to try and go down that greener route. I think you can still have your heat source, still have your air source pump and everything, but you have a boiler that works with the system.
Okay, so predominantly you can be heat source, and then on the cold winter days,
Yeah, just bump it up, boost it with the gas boiler. Yeah, so that would obviously in turn bring the gas usage down, obviously considerably. So that may be the better route, and hybrid systems work because you can't, if you do need to boost the heat source, then you've got the boiler to back it up.
Yep, no, that sounds good. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate your input, and it's good to have you on the show again, Terry.
Yeah, no, thank you
very much. Appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.